Who's the target audience that you were writing for?
So for the most part, we thought about CEOs of growing companies or entrepreneurs who wanted to become CEOs of growing companies. So that's really the target audience. It's senior executives and entrepreneurs with big ambitions.
And what is the big idea that you were hoping they would take away?
Well, we have a lot of big ideas, and David and I might answer the question a little differently, although we've worked together before. This is our second book. We did one in 1998, Competing on Internet Time, about Microsoft and Netscape. We find we have a high correlation, but we always come at things a little bit differently, and that's what makes for a nice book. So I guess from my point of view, and I think David would agree, one of the biggest messages is that you don't have to be perfect to be an extraordinarily successful leader. Bill Gates, Andy Grove, Steve Jobs had enormous strengths, but they also had some glaring weaknesses. And when we look carefully at what they did, they built companies around their strengths and found ways eventually to compensate for their gaps. And again, with the teams they built around them and processes and other things. And not until they found a way to kind of put all these pieces together were they successful. Gates did it first, was fastest at this. He was the most natural adapter of going from being an entrepreneur to a CEO and a kind of a manager of complex operations and people and technologies. Andy Grove took a bit longer, and Steve Jobs had the hardest time. It took him 20 years to figure out how to be a successful CEO. He's seen as a legend today, but he nearly drove Apple into bankruptcy a couple of times and drove his other company Next into bankruptcy. So it was a long time before Steve figured it out. So to me, that's one of the really biggest messages, and we talk about this in the last chapter, Build a Company Around Your Personal Anchor, but it's in other parts of the book. You don't have to be perfect. You need to have some important ideas that fit with the market as it's evolving at a particular time, but you need to build that team around you and compensate for what you're not good at and focus really on what is unique that you bring to the world. But leaders can be very flawed, and that's a big message we have.